Hello everyone. Welcome to Frenzy Recapped. In this video, we will follow a 2013 South Korean prison drama movie titled Way Back Home. Based on true events about a caring mother and a loving wife separated from her family due to a legal battle for survival in a foreign land thousands of miles away. Will justice prevail for an innocent soul regardless of distance? Let's find out together. Warning. Spoilers ahead, so watch out and take care. The story begins with a loving couple Song Jong-yeon and Im Jong-bae living a middle-class family life. They started a garage together from their savings and regardless of financial difficulties adamant to build a better tomorrow for their daughter Hyerin. One day, while working, the wife suffered a bad omen crushing a spider. She insists on delaying the guest arrival that day to her husband. He ignores her, calling it superstition. Moments later, two individuals, one is Mundo, meeting after a while, and the other one is Gwang-sik, who owns a cyber cafe, then shows up at the scene. The couple were very ecstatic to meet them and they later indulge themselves in a long evening gossiping over drinks. They begin with the flashy lifestyle. Mundo has been living with diamond hunts in Sumerian, and once he's settled properly, Mundo tempts the couple with plane tickets for foreign travel. The couple were surely overwhelmed with his kind gesture. Their chatter soon interrupted when another guest arrived, and it's Suji. After a warm welcome and greet, wearisome marks cover his face and nervously he thanks Jong-bae for his help. The wife upon hearing only felt lost and left confused, unaware of the reason. Jong-bae shares a more dramatic look and smartly drifts from the topic with cheering drinks. Hints towards something Jong-bae trying to separate her and left in the dark. 6 months later, inside the couple's humble abode, Jong-bae was anxious about Suji ignoring his call as he kept calling that went to voicemail. Then, he leaves for work with Hyerin after dropping her to school. His wife is busy cleaning the house when the doorbell rings and to her surprise, Suji makes a visit. More nervous than before, he devours with a mask of hesitation and tells of being just in the neighborhood when a crave for her food suddenly occurred to him. Suji then abruptly stumbles while eating relentlessly, which predicts the inner struggle with something. In the next scene, the couple were shocked to hear Suji taking his own life and being given a burden of a loan with Jong-bae as a guarantor. The couple learns that they are now on the hook for a mammoth loan and sky-high interest charged by the loan sharks. They sell their auto repair shop with the apartment just to pay off the loan. Soon, their livelihood takes a downturn in a small one-room apartment in a shady neighborhood. Jong-bae pays a visit to Mundo because of his contacts, where the couple meet with his girlfriend Lee Suji. Mundo suggests an interesting offer with some rare gemstones that need to be transferred to Paris and dodging customs with easy payouts. Lee Suji also volunteers to boost their confidence. Jong-yeon is hesitant with suspicion, but Jong-bae is willing to trust Mundo and sidelines her opinion. The couple are now months behind on rent and the impatient landlady gives an earful to Jong-yeon, warning to throw them out any day. Jong-bae overhears the daunting insults of the landlady to his wife. He calls Mundo right away to accept the offer even after protests from Jong-yeon. Mundo changes the terms asking for a woman. Jong-bae gets furious after listening and declines involving her. He storms off after arguing with his wife for the mistakes he committed that landed them here. Poor Hyerin starts crying from the burst out of her father. Jong-yeon comforts her with care and later feeds her delicacy to apologize for the events. Jong-yeon secretly calls Mundo, accepting the shady job. She left a note for Jong-bae, hiding about the job on purpose, with an excuse for a quiet space from ongoing troubles. Reaching the Paris airport, she feels extremely nervous but carries on with the task. However, she is already on a watch list for suspicious luggage and airport authorities converse over tackling her. Under the watchful eyes, the moment she tried moving her luggage, authorities rushed towards her blocking the way. Jong-yeon's helper for the trip flees, panicking from the alarmed barking dogs. Huge chunks of cocaine recovered from her bag and the officers were stunned with the revelation. Jong-yeon is arrested for smuggling drugs in a foreign land and they ignore her constant plea for innocence. Much later, Lee Suji also enters Jong-yeon's prison cell, both trapped and tricked into Mundo's spiral of illegal operations. In Korea, Jong-bae clearly explains how Mundo lied, tricking them and went into hiding. The officer in charge barely cares and just follows protocol to collect samples from him under the drug laws. Lee Suji is given a free pass and released under the condition to leave Paris immediately, while Jong-yeon is envious seeing her leaving. Being a main suspect for drug trafficking, she will face trial for having drugs in her bag and cries later while being transferred. The Korean embassy in France sends its section chief Chu Dae-hoon for her assistance. Jong-yeon then begs for one phone call to her husband. After several attempts, it connects and Jong-bae stands frozen, listening to her voice suddenly. Jong-yeon wants to talk with Hyerin, but the little girl is across the street sitting inside a car. Jong-bae quickly rushes through the traffic, but eventually runs out of time feeling guilty. Mundo's girlfriend reports in the police station after her arrival and Jong-bae confronts her. She then hints towards looking for a man who closely worked with Mundo. His name is Chae Tae-young. The section chief suggests hiring an expensive lawyer as it takes almost 4 months for proper trial and leading to another burden on Jong-bae's shoulders. While discussing the matter with his senior consul at Bang, They prejudge Jong Yun as a real-time drug smuggler and feel doubtful about wasting taxpayers' money on her. On the other hand, the landlady discarded the belongings without prior notice and Jong Bae left with nowhere to go. For a more dramatic turn of events, Jong Yun is ordered to pack her things and soon to be transferred to a remote island prison in Martinique. Jong Yun encounters first the chief guard infamously known as Hellboy. She treats the newcomers harshly while hysterically laughs at their sufferings. Jong Yun is deeply shaken with the first impression and proceeds to her quarters through anxious corridors. The eerie feeling wasn't bad enough. Jong Yun was frightened upon entering. Her roommate is Yalka, who adores a roaming rat, while Jong Yun trembles in hysteria and barely sleeps the night from sweating. Whereas, Jong Bae searches for useful leads to find Taeyang and beaten by a mob boss's underlings with equal interest to search for Moondu robbing off his money. They collaborated later to divide the search. Jong Bae scolds Gwansik for letting Hyren sleep in the smokers section of Cyber Cafe. He then drops her off at Ant's house, relieved for her well-being. Life in a new prison seems difficult for Jong Yun with rash inmates and nights ending in empty stomachs. She scramps the floor for the scattering remains of bread to please her hunger and only pukes later. Jong Bae gets closer to Taeyang in a watch shop and tips the lead officer about the developments. The officer ridicules Jong Bae's detective work with Movie Mania, but then he notices Taeyang's name in the wanted list for fraud, which alerts him. Taeyang fools Jong Bae by running away on a bike after having been skeptical of him. Yalka has seen Jong Yun struggle for food that night and collects some consumables from Hormone Rush Hellboy. Yalka gladly offers a piece of bread to Jong Yun. However, tension rises when some inmates assault Yalka, spiteful of her food bag, and her pendant drops from snatching. Jong Yun carefully reclaims her fallen pendant and only helplessly stares at Hellboy, who does nothing but enjoy the chaos like a daily soap. Everyone settled down afterwards with a strong beating. Jong Yun later returns the pendant to Yalka. Yalka points to the figure of her mother in the pendant and dearly embraces, recalling her image. Yalka then hugs Jong Yun, knowing she's a mother too. Back in Korea, Jong Bae receives the letters from Jong Yun for the first time, knowing about her relocation in Martinique and trial happening every 4 months. He rushes to Gwangsik to find the whereabouts of the place. Jong Bae quickly prepares to write back, picking out pictures of Hyren from the album and posts them to the prison. Jong Bae's combined work with the mob boss finally worked and they cornered Taeyang in his hideout. The cops enter the building afterward, self-claiming their own operation, and the mob boss uses trickery to call himself a friend of Jong Bae. The section chief declines Jong Bae's request for an interpreter for his wife and condemns wasting taxpayers' money on a criminal. Jong Bae feels disappointed, keeping the phone down. In response, Jong Yun's trial extended for another 4 months because of lack of communication. Moondu is finally captured and taken into custody. Jong Bae sprints into action to thrash him, kicking him off the chair. Infuriated with his backstabbing, Jong Bae questions him, breaking the long-built trust while barely controlled by other officers. The lead cop stops his actions and informs Jong Bae that they need favorable testimony from Moondu during trial. Jong Bae calms down himself after knowing the fact and begs down on his knees, pleading for help. He requests in the name of his family to think about both mother and daughter being separated for so long. Inside the prison cell, Jong Yun receives a parcel from Jong Bae, but Hellboy confiscates her panties, mocking rudely. Jong Yun sheds tears of joy just looking at the pictures of Hyren, and that night she was at ease. Hyren rolls down her tears receiving a letter from her mother and poses for more memorable pictures. The embassy excuses itself to cooperate and shuns the argument, blaming the jurisdiction of Martinique for not having any Korean to send an interpreter. Jong Bae is stunned again at the immorality of the embassy and uses the power of internet to find a Korean resident in Martinique. During the trial of Moondu, he confesses while taking a pause that Jong Yun is innocent and never known about the drugs. Moondu glares at Jong Bae to feel thankful for his statement. Jong Bae then clarifies, asking a gentleman that Jong Yun just needs to process a few documents to be released. The couple from both corners of the world were thrilled to know the good news. The section chief feels bothersome to be reminded of his duties. Unfortunately, the French translated documents from Korea carelessly mishandled and down-shredded. As a result, delaying her trial extended for another 4 months, and Jong Yun was devastated. She has written several letters to send the needed documents, but her replies were tossed in a corner to dust. Hyren injured herself inside Ant's house, so Jong Bae rushed worrying about her. Both later visit a wildlife park for bonding, and Hyren adorably helps her mother's trial with Ant's money. Jong Bae melts instantly and hugs her, feeling proud of her kind gesture. In Martinique, Jong Yun is taken into a secluded area without her knowledge, and Hellboy approaches her to force on her unfair advances. Some tourists crossing the lane hear her loud struggle and try calling the cops for help. Jong Yun seizes the opportunity to escape in a frenzy. She reaches a beautiful-looking beach and gets lost in the essence, while reminiscing about her dream of a Caribbean holiday once imagined. Jong Yun is captured later. She was pushed down the dark pits of solitary confinement, and it went extremely unwell for her. Jong Bae one day receives her call about being on parole. The pressure of paying monthly rent and living alone among strangers, where she measures the distance from her home on a world map. The childish tantrums of the embassy duo come to an end when public pressure rises for them. Watching the dire situation, they make a judgment call to see Jong Yun as an excuse for a Caribbean holiday. Jonghyun is living in a very bad shape and only her tears speak her sadness. The duo barely care about her serious problems and suggest meditation as a means to cover the time. Their visit is almost baseless, and before they leave, Jonghyun kneels down begging for mercy. The senior then burdens her explaining the debt on her family that has thrown Jong-bae out of the rented house. Jonghyun, after knowing, writes a letter to her husband to stop sending money and concentrate on paying off the debt. Her health deteriorated later and rushed to the nearby hospital. Jong-bae reads her letter, feeling the pain and suffering clearly. He tries to send a strong message to the higher officials, risking own life. Just after Jong-bae is released from prison, he meets a TV reporter Shin Cheol-ho. Through Gwang-sik, who knows about them and promises to broadcast their story. Jong-bae travels with the media crew to Martinique and greets Jonghyun personally, opening the door. She gets very emotional seeing him in front and both embrace each other in the most heartwarming manner. Jong-bae then shows an encouraging video message from Hyerin complaining about losing her image. Jonghyun breaks down further and Jong-bae tries to comfort her gracefully. The media crew then follows the reasons behind the delays in Jonghyun's trial and becomes acquainted with a Korean resident in Martinique. The woman herself was surprised by the embassy's negligence. During the interrogation in Korean embassy, when asked to present the receipt of the registered mail sent to the remote island prison, it was nowhere to be found in their office. Jong-bae had enough of their carelessness and manhandled them in a fit of rage. In return, they yell at Jonghyun for her husband's violent behavior and warn her not to act stubbornly. She collapses from weakness, while the duo prefers to ignore her like nothing happened. Jonghyun is deeply troubled after her encounter with the embassy duo and conveys the pain on phone. Jong-bae ensures not to believe a word they say, and taking care of her health becomes top priority. Sometimes later, the media members telecast their emotional story and it catches everyone's attention. It becomes the most trending topic and the internet explodes with support pouring from every corner. Jong-bae gets emotional from the response and posts a heartfelt message about Jonghyun being held inside a foreign prison unfairly. The working staff of the Korean embassy is shattered checking the news and gossip about the embassy duo's involvement in causing the shame. They were sent to Kazakhstan as a punishment. The day of her trial arrives with the long-awaited judgment against countless hurdles she endured. Jong-bae is worried sick back in South Korea, hoping for the trial to be in her favor. The attorneys from both sections presented their claims regarding the case while the Korean resident translates the conversation. The jury asked for the closing comments to Jonghyun. At first, she was nervous but later felt the urge to conjure some strength to make her voice heard. Her speech was straight on claiming drugs without knowledge and blames herself for being away from her daughter, Hyerin. Like how she is growing up without a mother and a caring husband raising her alone with difficulties every corner. She breaks down from the burden of overwhelming emotions in front of everyone. The judge announced sentencing her to 1 year in prison, but she was behind bars for almost 2 years. It means she has served extra time compared to the final verdict and finally free from the charges upheld. Jonghyun refuses to claim the compensation money without any hesitation and wishes to be with her family, seeking her way back home. During the final act, Jonghyun is stepping on a Korean airport taking back her passport. The family waits outside to welcome her on a grand scale. The moment she sees them together, her emotions overwhelms itself and Jong-bae lifts up Hyerin and rejoice. However, Hyerin reacts with a tone of unfamiliarity and thinks her as some stranger. Jonghyun can't blame the child while wishes for her acceptance as a mother. Eventually, Hyerin catches her motherly tears and questions her long absence. They barely hold back from crying relentless as tightly hugging each other. Jong-bae, standing beside, felt a great sense of relief with them together again. Snow falls in the last scene as the family prepares for a group photo. Jong-bae then gets a call from the embassy reminding his wife free from drug-related issues. He cuts the call in the middle and it shows how slow they work in a crisis. The family poses for the camera, smiling blissfully in the end. So, what do you think of the story? Comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content in the future. I'll see you next time. Frenzy out.